I used to believe we had something real. Victor and I, we built a life together, or at least that's what I thought. We had dinner parties, traveled, posed for photos with rehearsed smiles. But behind those perfectly framed moments, something hollow echoed. Nights became longer, quieter, filled with questions I was too afraid to ask out loud. And deep down, I think I already knew the answer before I ever found it. It started small. Slips of paper tucked into his briefcase, calls that ended too quickly when I entered the room. He would laugh at my curiosity, patting my hand like I was a child. "Don't worry your pretty head, Clara," he'd say, with that smirk that made me feel foolish. But I listened to the silence between his words. I watched the way his eyes darted when money came up. He thought he was clever. I kept quiet, played my part. But inside, I was unraveling and rebuilding all at once. I found myself scrolling through old memories, wondering when trust had turned into suspicion. I remembered our early days, holding hands on park benches, sharing dreams over coffee. Now all I could taste was bitterness. And still I smiled. I nodded. I waited, because I needed more than just a gut feeling. So I found help. A discreet financial advisor, someone who could follow the breadcrumbs Victor thought he'd hidden so well. Each discovery felt like a punch to the stomach. Accounts in fake names, properties I'd never seen, layers of deceit built with precision. But instead of falling apart, I felt a strange calm wash over me. He thought he'd won. He had no idea I was just getting started. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of documents my advisor handed me. My fingers trembled as I flipped through pages of secrets, offshore accounts, properties under shell companies. It was all there, every deception carefully crafted to leave me with nothing. But the strangest part? I didn't cry, not one tear. I just sat there, breathing in the scent of stale coffee, feeling something inside me harden. I thought about confronting him. I imagined shouting, throwing those papers in his face, demanding answers. But then I saw his face in my mind, that smug, dismissive look, and I knew I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. No, I needed more than revenge. I needed to make him feel small, powerless. I wanted him to taste humiliation so sharp it would burn. But to do that, I had to stay quiet a little longer. Every morning after that felt different. I'd watch him leave for work, briefcase in hand, humming to himself like the world belonged to him. And I'd smile, softly, pretending to kiss him goodbye. Inside, I was memorizing every detail, the arrogance in his stride, the weight of his lies pressing against my skin like a too tight coat. I became an actress in my own home, and strangely, I was good at it, better than I ever knew. At night, I'd sit in bed with my laptop glowing in the dark, piecing together his empire of deception. Passwords cracked, statements downloaded, dots connected. Every click was a quiet victory, a step closer to something bigger than just taking my share. I wanted him to remember me not as the naive wife he underestimated, but as the woman who left him breathless, blindsided, and begging. There was a strange thrill in holding his secrets in my hands. I'd sit there, fingertips tracing the outlines of numbers and addresses he thought I'd never see. My heart would race, not with fear, but with control. For once, I wasn't the fool in the story. I was writing the ending, word by word, and he didn't even know he was a character in my plot. And oh, I planned to make the final scene unforgettable. I started imagining his face the moment he'd realize. How his confidence would crack, how his words would tangle and fall apart. But I didn't rush. I savored every step, meeting with my lawyer in quiet offices that smelled of leather and polished wood, sipping tea while signing papers that would shake his world. Every detail had to be perfect. It wasn't just about justice anymore. It was art. Funny how people show you who they are when they think you're not watching. He would sit across from me at dinner, swirling his wine, eyes gleaming with secrets. He thought he was untouchable, and I'd nod along, slicing into my food, thinking, "You have no idea what's coming for you." There was power in patience. I could feel it growing inside me, steady and electric, humming beneath my skin. I didn't just want my share of what he stole. I wanted him to feel what I'd felt. The quiet humiliation, the loneliness, the nights filled with doubt. I wanted to give him that gift, wrapped in ribbons of irony, and I knew exactly when and where I'd deliver it. But that's getting ahead of myself. First, I had to let him keep playing his little game, right up until the day I took the board away. The morning of the court date, I woke up to sunlight pouring through the curtains, warm and golden. It felt strange, almost peaceful. I stood there for a moment, watching the dust float in the light, breathing in that quiet calm before the storm. Victor was already gone, probably rehearsing smug lines in front of the mirror. He thought today was his victory parade, and honestly, I let him believe that. I chose my outfit carefully, simple, elegant, nothing loud. I wanted to look serene, untouched by chaos. As I buttoned my blouse, I caught my reflection and barely recognized myself. There was strength in my eyes I hadn't seen before. Not anger, not sadness, just clarity. The kind of clarity that comes from knowing the end of the story before everyone else. My hands were steady. My heart was calm. Walking into that courtroom felt like stepping onto a stage I had built with my own 2 hands. Victor sat there, legs crossed, smirking, tapping his pen like a child waiting for a treat. He didn't even look at me when I sat down. Of course he didn't. In his mind, I was defeated already, bitter, desperate, small. If only he knew. I smiled softly to myself and folded my hands in my lap. The show was about to begin. But even as I sat there, outwardly composed, my mind was alive with all the pieces moving behind the curtain. The charities, the letters, the irreversible signatures. Months of planning, lining up like dominoes, waiting for the right flick. I could almost hear the echo of it in my head. Today wasn't just about ending a marriage. It was about writing the first line of his legacy and letting him read it aloud. He kept glancing at his watch, that little smirk never leaving his face. I could tell he was expecting drama. Maybe tears, maybe begging. He was waiting for me to crack, to confirm the story he'd written in his head. But I sat still, breathing slow and steady, letting silence do the work for me. And slowly, I saw it. That flicker of confusion in his eyes, like he couldn't quite place what felt off. The judge began the proceedings, her voice steady and practiced. Victor answered questions with confidence, leaning back in his chair like he owned the room. I nodded when asked, spoke only when necessary, each word careful and composed. But inside, I was already watching the next act unfold. I could feel the weight of the folder in my bag, paper and ink, holding the power to turn his entire world upside down. Victor shifted in his seat, tapping his fingers, trying to cover his nerves. He didn't like silence when it wasn't under his control. I met his gaze once, just long enough to see the cracks forming. He looked away first. That moment tasted sweeter than I thought it would. The mighty man, uncomfortable in his own skin, sensing danger without knowing where it would strike. I kept my face soft, my heart steady. I thought about all the people he'd mocked, the causes he'd laughed at, the lives he dismissed as meaningless. He never imagined his name would be attached to them, but I had made sure it would be. Carefully, thoroughly, irreversibly. I imagined those letters sitting in mailboxes, framed on walls, his signature below words of kindness he never meant. And soon, he would see them all at once. The minutes dragged and yet flew by. Every legal formality, every monotone statement from the lawyers felt like background noise to me. I kept thinking, any second now, Victor, any second. I could almost feel the weight of his ego in the room, so heavy, so blinding. He had no clue he was standing on a trapdoor of his own making, and I was holding the lever with the lightest touch. At one point, he leaned over and whispered, "You'll land on your feet, Clara. I'm sure." His voice dripped with condescension, the kind you can't fake. I just smiled, nodding slightly, feeling a thrill run through me. I didn't need to correct him. I didn't need to defend myself. I had already rewritten the ending, and soon he would read it out loud for everyone to hear. That was enough. Behind the calm mask, I kept replaying the steps I had taken, the calls to charities, the discreet meetings, the careful explanations to lawyers who raised their eyebrows but followed instructions without question. Each document signed and sealed. Each letter printed on heavy paper, thanking Victor for his unexpected generosity. I imagined boardrooms filled with laughter and disbelief, his name now synonymous with kindness he never gave. And there I sat, legs crossed, fingers resting lightly on my lap, heart steady and slow. The final signatures were coming, the final words. He thought he was about to close a chapter and walk away the victor. But what he didn't know was that I wasn't closing anything. I was opening a door for him, one he'd never be able to close. But that part was for the next moment. The judge's voice sounded distant, like I was underwater. I heard words like settlement, final agreement, and irreconcilable differences, all so neat and sterile. But inside, I felt alive. Every nerve awake, humming, sharp. I glanced at Victor. He was already halfway to victory in his mind, his foot tapping impatiently. He wanted the gavel to fall, the curtain to close. He had no idea the show wasn't over. When the judge asked if either party wanted to speak, Victor shook his head, already gathering his papers. That's when I spoke up, calm, clear. Your Honor, if I may, just a few words. Victor froze. Slowly he looked up at me, confused, eyebrows knitting together. I could almost see his brain scrambling. What is she doing? My heart didn't race. My breath didn't falter. I'd waited for this moment far too long. I stood, smoothing the fabric of my skirt, and turned to the room. My voice was steady, gentle, almost warm. I thanked the court. I thanked Victor, too, for teaching me lessons in patience, in strategy, in self-worth. I saw his confusion twist into discomfort. He shifted in his seat, eyes narrowing, but I kept going. And before we sign, I said softly, I'd like to leave you with something. I reached into my bag, pulled out the folder, thick, crisp, heavy with secrets he thought were safe. I walked over and placed it in front of him, my fingers brushing the leather edge. He stared at it like it might explode. Everything you tried so hard to hide, I said, looking him in the eye, is already gone. For one long moment, the room was silent. I could feel the weight of every breath around me. Victor's hand trembled as he opened the folder. I watched his eyes dart across the pages, scanning faster and faster, like he could somehow undo the words by reading them quickly. His face paled. His jaw slackened. I heard the faintest, broken whisper escape his lips. No, 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 no. My heart didn't gloat. It simply settled. The truth was heavier than I'd imagined, but it fit perfectly in my hands. Around the room, chairs creaked softly as heads turned. The lawyers leaned in, curiosity flickering across their faces. Even the judge's expression shifted, her eyes sharp and attentive now. I could almost hear their thoughts. What is this? What did she do? Victor's breathing turned ragged. He flipped another page, then another. Letters from charities, stamped with seals and gratitude, thanking him by name. Each one a nail in the coffin of his arrogance. He looked up at me, eyes wild, mouth opening and closing like a man drowning. What did you do? His voice cracked, thin and helpless. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The papers spoke louder than I ever could. Donations to environmental groups he ridiculed, shelters he dismissed, causes he mocked over cocktails with his friends, all under his name, all permanent, all public. And there was no undoing any of it. I sat back down slowly, folding my hands again, watching him unravel in real time. His confidence collapsed, piece by piece, right there in front of everyone. The man who thought he owned the room was suddenly very small. I felt the weight lift off my chest, replaced by something light and steady. This wasn't revenge, it was balance. And for the first time in years, I felt whole. Victor's fingers clawed at the papers, as if he could tear them apart and erase what had already been done. His breath came in short, panicked gasps. I watched his composure slip through his fingers, and for a moment he looked like a little boy caught in a lie too big to fix. The silence in the room grew louder with every second. Everyone was watching, but no one spoke. His humiliation filled every corner. He tried to stand, stumbled, and dropped the folder. Papers scattered across the polished floor. He fell to his knees, frantically gathering them, eyes wild, muttering half-sentences no one could understand. I stayed seated, still and composed, feeling the weight of years of deceit finally tip over. He had been so sure, so certain I would never catch up. But here he was, broken open in front of everyone he once sought to impress. The judge cleared her throat, but even she couldn't mask the shift in the room. His lawyers looked away, embarrassed. The court reporter's fingers hovered over her keys, unsure if this moment should be recorded or simply witnessed. And I just sat there letting the silence speak for me. Every breath Victor took now tasted of panic and regret. It was everything he thought he'd never feel. And yet, I didn't smile. I didn't need to. There was power in stillness, in letting him drown in the consequences of his own choices. I gathered my purse, smoothed my skirt, and looked at him one last time. He wouldn't meet my gaze, but I didn't need his eyes. I already had everything I came for. And we weren't done yet, not by a long shot. He sat there, knees on the cold marble floor, clutching those crumpled papers like they could save him. His breath came in sharp, jagged gasps, too loud in a room that had fallen into stunned silence. His face, once so smug, was pale and streaked with sweat. His hands trembled as he whispered, "Please, this can't be real." But it was. Every line, every signature, every dollar he thought he'd hidden, gone. I watched him without pity. I had spent years swallowing humiliation, biting back words, hiding tears in the bathroom while he bragged and belittled. Now, his pride crumbled right in front of strangers who used to respect him. The lawyers whispered behind cupped hands. The judge kept her face composed, but I caught the subtle shake of her head. Disapproval wrapped in quiet professionalism. He had brought this on himself. Victor tried to gather himself, pushing to his feet, but his legs gave out. He dropped again with a thud that echoed through the room. His voice cracked as he turned to me, eyes wide, wild. "You can't do this," he gasped. His desperation clung to the air, heavy and sour. I sat motionless, heart steady, feeling the weight I'd carried for so long finally slip off my shoulders. This moment wasn't cruel, it was justice. The room had become a stage he never wanted to stand on. His empire of lies was burning around him, and he was choking on the smoke. He looked to his lawyers for help, but they avoided his gaze. He searched the room, looking for anyone to save him, but no one moved. No one would. And that was when I saw it. The flicker of realization in his eyes. The beginning of understanding. And I knew it would only get worse. He covered his face with both hands, his breath ragged and uneven. I could hear soft, broken sobs slip through his fingers, muffled but raw. The sound filled the room, awkward, heavy, and impossible to ignore. I sat still, feeling the coldness of the courtroom bench beneath me, the soft rustle of papers as someone shifted behind me, the smell of polished wood, the faint scent of sweat, everything vivid, sharp, unforgettable. Victor's sobs turned into whispers. "I can fix this! I can fix this!" He rocked back and forth on his knees, clutching those papers like a life raft that was already sinking. The man who once spoke with arrogance and certainty was now nothing but fragments. I thought back to all the times he dismissed me, called me naive, and now here he was, desperate, lost, and completely alone. There was nothing left for him to control. One of the clerks shifted uncomfortably. The judge cleared her throat softly but didn't interrupt. Everyone knew this moment belonged to him, or rather, to the ruin he'd built with his own hands. I felt almost weightless watching him break apart. Not out of cruelty, but because this wasn't revenge anymore. It was balance restoring itself, like water finding its level after a storm. He had tipped the scales for so long. Now they righted themselves. He finally looked up at me. Red-rimmed eyes, trembling lips, sweat beading on his forehead. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Just a broken breath that hitched in his throat. In that moment, I didn't see my husband. I didn't see the man I once loved. I saw the truth. A man who built walls out of lies and finally found himself trapped inside. And I wasn't going to open the door for him. He tried one last time to speak, his voice hoarse and cracked. "Your Honor, please. This isn't right. She can't do this." His words stumbled out, broken and childlike. The judge's face remained neutral, but there was a softness in her eyes, not for him, but perhaps for me. She nodded once, slow and deliberate. "Everything is legal and binding, Mr. Adams," she said. Her voice was gentle but firm. The final nail. Victor's shoulders sagged, and I watched him deflate completely, like all the air had been sucked from his body. He sat there on the floor, staring down at the folder now scattered around him like ashes. His lawyers looked on helplessly. They wouldn't touch it. They wouldn't touch him. I could see it written on their faces. This was beyond repair. His reputation, his pride, all of it shattered in full view of the world he once dominated. I watched as whispers started to fill the room, soft murmurs behind hands, stolen glances. The kind of whispers that would travel beyond these walls, into offices, homes, and social circles. Victor Adams, the man who had it all, stripped bare. And he knew it. He could feel it in the way people avoided his eyes, the way silence turned thick and suffocating. He wasn't the king anymore. He wasn't anything. I exhaled slowly, quietly. No gloating, no smirk. Just the deep, quiet satisfaction of someone who had finally found the courage to stand tall. I gathered my things without hurry, each movement deliberate, graceful. But I didn't leave yet. I sat for one more moment, watching him crumble, letting him sit in the silence he used to weaponize against me. And soon, very soon, it would be time to say goodbye. The final signatures were done. The gavel struck softly, echoing in the hollow silence of the courtroom. I stood, smoothing my skirt one last time, ready to walk away from the ashes. But before I could take a step, I heard it. The sound of him falling. A heavy, broken thud as Victor dropped to his knees in the middle of the polished floor. His breath came in choking sobs, loud and raw, echoing off the walls. He clutched at my sleeve, his fingers trembling, damp with sweat and desperation. "Please, Clara, please." His voice cracked, hoarse and pleading, nothing like the man I had once known. His tears fell hot against my skin, soaking through the fabric. The courtroom had gone deathly silent. All eyes on him, on us. His humiliation was complete, but now came the begging. The part he never thought he'd play. "I'll change," he sobbed, his words tumbling out between gasps. "I swear, I'll be better. I'll make it right. Just give it back. Don't leave me like this." His fingers clung to me with the desperation of a drowning man grabbing driftwood. But there was no saving him. No way back. The room felt heavy, almost suffocating with the weight of his unraveling. But I stood still, steady, unmoved. Slowly, I turned to face him. His face was red and streaked with tears, his body trembling, broken, small. I met his eyes, those same eyes that once looked at me with arrogance and dismissal, and saw only fear. And in that moment, I felt nothing but clarity. Ice-cold, clean clarity. He was crying for loyalty he'd discarded, for trust he'd betrayed, for a life he destroyed with his own hands. And now, he'd face it alone. I took a deep breath, steady and slow. The air tasted different now. Lighter, cleaner, like the weight of years had finally lifted from my chest. Victor's grip tightened on my sleeve, but I gently pulled my arm free. His hand lingered in the air for a moment, empty, trembling. The silence stretched long and thick between us. He whispered again, his voice cracked and hoarse. "Please, don't leave me like this." I looked down at him, kneeling on the cold, polished floor, the man who once thought he was untouchable, reduced to begging at my feet. And all I could think was how poetic it was, how fitting. I felt no anger anymore. No desire for vengeance, only a quiet, icy calm. I met his eyes one last time and spoke softly, so only he could hear. "You threw away loyalty and trust for greed. Now, you'll cry for it alone." His face crumpled, a sob catching in his throat like a stone he couldn't swallow. I turned away, slowly, deliberately, letting him feel the space grow between us. Each step I took felt lighter, stronger. Behind me, the sounds of his sobs filled the courtroom, raw, desperate, humiliating. But I didn't look back. I wouldn't give him that comfort. He had taken enough from me already. The courtroom doors opened with a soft creak, and the air outside hit my skin like freedom itself. I stepped out into the sunlight, blinking against the brightness, feeling it warm my face. The weight was gone, completely, utterly gone. For the first time in years, I could breathe without heaviness. I closed my eyes, lifted my chin, and smiled. It was over, and I was finally free. I took a few steps forward and paused at the top of the courthouse steps. The world felt bigger out here. The noise of traffic, the warmth of the sun, the smell of fresh spring air. It all felt new, like I had shed a skin I'd been trapped in for too long. I stood still for a moment, savoring the simplicity of standing alone, with nothing, and no one, weighing me down. Behind those doors, I knew he was still on the floor, crying into silence, begging for a past he could never get back. And I didn't hate him for it. I pitied him, perhaps, but more than that, I felt nothing. Emptiness, but not the hollow kind, the peaceful kind, the kind that made room for possibility, for something better, something honest. I had closed that chapter, but I wasn't walking away from it. I was walking into something new. As I descended the steps, I let the sounds of the city wash over me. The distant honk of a horn, the laughter of a child, the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Life was happening all around me, and for the first time in years, I felt ready to be part of it. No secrets, no shadows, just me, whole, strong, unapologetic. I didn't know what came next, but for once that didn't scare me. I reached the sidewalk, turned the corner, and kept walking, each step lighter than the last. I didn't look back. There was nothing left for me behind those doors. Only ahead, only forward. The weight was gone, the storm had passed, and the world felt wide open. I breathed in, slow and deep, and smiled to myself. Sometimes, the ultimate goodbye is the kind that sets you free.